Welcome, my beautiful people, to another episode of Dino Basics, where we dig up the basics on some of our favorite deceased beasts. My name is Logan, and today we take a look at possibly one of the most important crested hadrosaurs. Of course, you have the more recognizable Parasaurolophus and Corythosaurus, but before them all, you had one of the earliest known hadrosaurs, not necessarily by the same name. Lambeosaurus. The story of Lambeosaurus is long, convoluted, and has a surprising amount of cameos from significant paleontologists from the turn of the 20th century. Our story begins sometime in the 1890s, as an expedition near the Red Deer River in modern-day Alberta, Canada, would reveal interesting deposits of fragile dinosaur bones. One paleontologist, Canadian Lawrence M. Lamb, would take it upon himself to lead 3 expeditions into the region in 1897, 1898, and 1901, recovering an extensive array of remains from a variety of dinosaur species. Among them, 3 of these species would be for the now nomen dubium, or doubtfully used genus, Trachodon. As for how this relates to Lambeosaurus, one fossil later assigned to this very genus would instead be assigned to the species Trachodon marginatus, which included a jawbone, a variety of limb remains, and an assortment of teeth. Fellow paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn, who would be among those to discover Velociraptor and Protoceratops, would help describe the creatures discovered and provide the subgenus name Didanodon for the marginatus. Essentially, a subgenus is a way to divide a large genus without needing to create a completely distinct genus, only an existing species. And for a large and unruly wastebasket taxon like Trachodon, this would need to be the case. Fast forward to 1913, where American paleontologist Charles Hazelius Sternberg, the fossil excavator responsible for the Edmontosaurus mummy, uncovered additional remains for the Trachodon marginatus, providing enough evidence for Lamb to conclude that this species should stand as its own genus, providing the name Stephanosaurus. Many specimens formerly belonging to Trachodon would be transferred into this new genus, aside from one fairly complete skull that would instead be assigned to fellow Hadrosaur Corythosaurus, at the behest of Barnum Brown, who was often referred to as Mr. Bones for his prolific paleontology career, with the most notable achievement from his work being the discovery of Tyrannosaurus rex. Brown argued that because the holotype specimen of Stephanosaurus lacked a skull, it would not be possible to assign a new skull without a point of comparison or some other compelling evidence. Following this, in 1919, Lamb would turn into mutton and pass away from pneumonia, but before this, would assign a more complete skull and skeleton to Stephanosaurus. But paleontologist William Parks, who named, so many dinosaurs, would disagree with this conclusion, citing the same logic as Brown for why this shouldn't be done and instead have the remains to find a new dinosaur genus. And to honor the late paleontologist, Park would choose the name Lambeosaurus lami. As of 1923, Stephanosaurus and Lambeosaurus would both exist as independent genus of hadrosaur. However, this same year, Stephanosaurus would be redefined as a nomen dubium, due to a lacking holotype specimen, making it difficult to definitively compare new specimens being considered for the genus. With this decision, many of the specimens would be moved into Lambeosaurus, leaving it as a definitive genus. But over the next 50 years, the confusion over unique hadrosaurs would get much worse. You see, a common tool for differentiating genera is comparing skull material, as skulls often provide an abundance of detail for identifying individual species or genera, like unique features, teeth count, and skull openings, among others. But this method is not foolproof, as certain animals can undergo drastic changes in skull makeup as they age. There are plenty of dinosaurs where unique genera are later reconsidered as an earlier stage of life for a previously existing dinosaur genus. Some examples of this are Torosaurus and Triceratops, Nanotyrannus and Tyrannosaurus rex, or Dracorex, Stygimoloch, and Pachycephalosaurus. Crested hadrosaurs seem even more susceptible to this, as due to various Lambeosaurines sporting similar body structures and growing to similar sizes, head crests have historically been a key identifier for naming new genus. But later studies have proven that these crests can change wildly within one genus or even species, based on age and sex, leading to false identification of new genera based almost exclusively on crest shape and size. In 1975, American paleontologist Peter Dodson would come to this very conclusion, arguing a number of previously established unique crested hadrosaurs are, in fact, not unique crested hadrosaurs, but instead different growth stages or examples of sexual dimorphism for previously named Lambeosaurin genera. In Dodson's case, mostly falling within Lambeosaurus and Corythosaurus. Subsequent studies and analysis would agree with Dodson's conclusion, and formerly independent genera, Procheniosaurus and Tetragonosaurus, would be moved to synonyms of Lambeosaurus. This would be the last significant change to the Lambeosaurus genus of today, aside from one species, the Laticatus, being redesignated as an independent genus of hadrosaur, the Magnipolia. If you've been keeping up, you probably have a pretty good idea for how Lambeosaurus was named. Both the genus and the original species for the creature, Lammi, were chosen to honor paleontologist Lawrence Lamb, who was instrumental in discovering and setting the groundwork for how we know the creature today. Lambeosaurus also has two other species, the Lambeosaurus magnicristatus and the Clavinitialis. Magnicristatus translates from Latin, including the words magnus for large and cristatus for crested, directly translated to large crested, a name that will make more sense in a moment. Clavinitialis also stems from Latin, including clavis for key and initialis for initial or beginning, translating to key beginnings. This name was chosen to honor the significance that the genus as a whole has had on our understanding of the broader Hadrosaur family, as many specimens from the late 1800s for the Hadrosaurs were fairly fragmentary and limited. Both these species are fairly similar to their originator, Lambeosaurus lammi, so we will briefly go over their differences now before describing the genus more thoroughly through the lens of Lammi. Magnicristatus, based on the positioning of the fossil from a geological perspective, is believed to be a later descendant of the genus. Both would have been fairly similar in size and general physique, with the largest difference being the construction of certain bones like the pubic, cervical vertebra, and ilium, among others. The most dramatic difference from Lammi is usually cited as the crest, with its construction being slightly different than its fellow species, and often growing to a generally larger size, thus the name translation large crest. Clavinitialis, meanwhile, is suggested to be the oldest of the three by only a few 100,000 years, and has been cited as a potential example of sexual dimorphism for Lammi and Magnicristatus. Generally, the scientific community seems to point towards the former, but there are of course dissenting voices. The differences between Lammi and Clavinitialis are fairly minimal, once again adding leverage to the idea of Clavinitialis not being a unique species, with the most noticeable difference being the generally smaller and less defined crest when compared to Lammi. As I have noted a few times now, the Lambeosaurus belong to the Hadrosauridae family, descendants of the early Cretaceous iguanodontia, including members like Iguanodon, that became some of the most successful and widespread dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous. This group is often referred to as duck-billed dinosaurs for their distinctive bill-like mouths filled with hundreds of teeth, excellent for processing the large amount of vegetation these creatures would need to survive. More specifically, Lambeosaurus was a member of and the namesake for the Lambeosaurines, a classification of hadrosaurs most easily recognized for their ornate head crests sporting hollow openings within. A staple among previous, very early Dino Basics episodes, like Parasaurolophus or even earlier Corythosaurus. You know, before the videos were good. They are good now, right? Lambeosaurus was a fairly average-sized hadrosaur and lambeosaurin, but a considerably large animal in general. Estimates believe the creature would have reached about 24 feet, or 8 meters in length, and could reach almost 7 feet, or about 2 meters tall at the hip. At this size, it is estimated the creature could have weighed nearly 3 tons, largely owed to its fairly bulky body. The most eye-catching trait of Lambeosaurus would obviously be that ornate head crest. Exact size and shape would vary between gender and age, but it is often described as a thin, hatchet-shaped structure forming just above their nasal cavity, with the highest point being just above their eye. Scientists early on believed the crest would be used strictly for display, similar to modern cassowaries or hornbills. It is believed this crest would display vibrant colors to illustrate health for potential mates, or be used as intimidation to would-be rivals or predators. However, later analysis revealed this crest and many others present on fellow Lambeosaurin members hid greater complexity. These crests would hold air passages, forming an almost S-shaped structure leading further into the crest, ending about halfway and leaving the rest of the crest as solid bone. This discovery led to a flurry of new theories for what purpose this crest served, some of which included thermoregulation, enhanced smell, and sodium regulation, among others. But a 2006 study conducted by paleontologist David Evans concluded that this internal anatomy did not lead to the brain, disproving the commonly held belief that this crest would enhance their olfactory senses. Give them a better sniffer. Leading many to consider the likely purpose for this crest to be communication. This theory argues that the hollow chambers within the crest could act as a resonating device. And without turning this into a lesson on music theory, air entering the structure would vibrate throughout the crest to amplify the sound, something like an echo chamber. The sound produced by this crest was likely low in tone and able to be heard over long distances, likely for the purpose of warning their herd of oncoming danger, or for locating lost members. This theory also provides justification for why some Lambeosaurin members would sport vastly different shaped crest. Aside from visual difference, this unique structure could allow individual genus to produce different sound and not confuse themselves with other crested hadrosaur calls. The mouth of Lambeosaurus would sport that iconic duck-like bill. The front of this mouth would be tipped in a short beak, which would then be followed by hundreds of blunt teeth. Many early interpretations believed Lambeosaurus and many other hadrosaurs would be similar to ducks in feeding as well, being largely aquatic to scoop up mouthfuls of aquatic soft plants in their wide beaks. While it is likely aquatic plants could be a source of food for these creatures, modern analysis of stomach contents indicate Lambeosaurus would have been what's called a generalist browser, eating a variety of select plant material like conifers, seeds, fruits, and decaying wood, among a variety of other plant material. The rest of their body is often cited as being nearly identical to many of their other Lambeosaurin brethren, aside from a few skeletal discrepancies. The body of Lambeosaurus was fairly bulky, sporting fairly short forelimbs when compared to their more robust hind limbs. This construction indicates Lambeosaurus was likely able to walk on both all fours as well as just their hind limbs, likely preferring all fours when eating or trotting at slow speeds, and rearing onto their back limbs to reach higher vegetation or run at faster speeds. While rearing onto their hind limbs would provide greater height, the hoof-like structure of their second, third, and fourth digits indicate these forelimbs would not be used for grabbing and holding onto food when foraging. Just behind these back legs, Lambeosaurus would sport a fairly robust tail to counterbalance their weighty body. Lambeosaurus would have lived during the late Cretaceous, with estimates placing the exact date somewhere around 75 million years ago. Remains of the creature have been recovered throughout the western United States, as well as much of Canada. Many of these fossils are concentrated in the modern-day Dinosaur Park Formation, located in southern Alberta, Canada. Analysis of the region from fossil records indicate it was likely a fairly warm one, interspersed with various rivers and floodplains, surrounded by dense forests of vegetation. Due to the area's proximity to the Western Interior Seaway, a large inland sea that split the North American continent during the Cretaceous, it is likely the region would see times of flooding, possibly creating temporary swamp-like environments. The fossil records of this region are extremely well documented, which illustrated a vibrant ecosystem home to a wide range of life. Among these were ceratopsids like the Centrosaurus, ankylosaurs like the Euoplocephalus, and fellow hadrosaurs like the Parasaurolophus. As for carnivores, these included a variety of smaller predators like the Dromaeosaurus and Stenonychosaurus, but these were likely minimal threats. Instead, mighty tyrannosaurs like the Gorgosaurus and possibly a species of Daspletosaurus would be the apex predators of this environment. A common misconception for hadrosaurs is that these creatures would be helpless prey to the larger carnivores of their environment, especially compared to the previously mentioned ceratopsids and ankylosaurs, which would sport much more obvious defenses for fighting off these predators. While there is some truth to this, it is almost certainly an over-exaggeration, and only portrayed this way when directly compared to their defense-heavy neighbors. It's like if I walked into a room with Chris Pratt, and everyone said, "Man, Logan is so hot. Chris Pratt must have no luck with the ladies." It isn't exactly a fair comparison. Let's consider Lambeosaurus with no comparison to other herbivores. When considering their likely predators, for example the Gorgosaurus, which grew to about 26 feet or about 9 meters in length and weighed almost 3 tons, this is almost the exact same size as an adult Lambeosaurus. Gorgosaurus, with their powerful jaws and dozens of sharpened teeth, certainly has the more blatant lethal power. But taking a Lambeosaurus head-on would be a dangerous prospect even for this creature. If it were not careful, a Gorgosaurus could easily have a few ribs or even a leg broken if hit by the 3 tons of fat and muscle a Lambeosaurus would wield. And in the wild, injuries like these could be a death sentence. While Lambeosaurus certainly wasn't immune to predation like certain sauropods when at full size, it is likely even the largest predators would only target smaller individuals, and only risk a fully grown male with an ambush, if ever. Despite being the namesake of the crested hadrosaur family, Lambeosaurus has often found itself overshadowed by other members of this group, like Parasaurolophus or Corythosaurus. But Lambeosaurus itself has still been able to land a few roles of its own. These have included a surprisingly healthy amount of representation in animation, first appearing in the Rite of Spring section of 1940s film Fantasia, and much later appearing in animated shows, 2009's Dinosaur Train. as well as appearing throughout multiple films and television series in the Land Before Time franchise. Aside from these, Lambeosaurus has seen smaller appearances across documentaries, and a few appearances across video games, like 2020's Path of Titans, and 2022's Prehistoric Kingdom. Like many dinosaurs we've covered before, the history of Lambeosaurus is far from a linear path. It has gone through various revisions, reinterpretations, renamings, and reclassifications, just to try to get a grasp of what this creature was. And knowing what we know now, it certainly seems more than worth it. Lambeosaurus is an incredible creature, sporting an iconic crest and providing fascinating insights into a family we had only just begun to understand. If you're looking for a dinosaur with a rich history, distinct appearance, and unassuming power, I think it's safe to say Lambeosaurus is a lamb dunk. That's good to do for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to leave a comment below what you think of Lambeosaurus, and if you've heard of this dinosaur before the video. I was not expecting the script for this dinosaur to be nearly this long, and I left a lot of back and forth when it came to classification, so this was certainly fun to write. Next week, we're overdue for a non-dinosaur on the Dino Basics. I know how paradoxical that sounds. So we'll be covering the Triassic anomaly that is Shringosaurus. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next video.